Welcome to Cowgirl Talk, where we empower you to live authentically through real food, real talk, and real life. Sisters brought together by our love of cows. We're your host, Emily, a dairy lover and personal trainer living in Florida.
And Becca, a corporate cowgirl holding down the family fort in Pennsylvania. Let's go, cowgirls!
Hello, and welcome back to Cowgirl Talk. We are so excited for today's episode because we're interviewing Dr. Frank Mitloehner. And many of you may know Dr. Frank Mitloehner as GHG Guru online. And if you don't, you're obviously going to get to know Frank a little bit better in this episode, but a brief description is Dr. Frank Mitloehner is a professor and air quality specialist in cooperative extension in the Department of Animal Science at UC Davis. And he is also the director of the Clear Center, which has two cores, research and communications. He's going to be diving into all these things in today's interview. And Dr. Frank Mitloehner is just a huge advocate for animal agriculture and really shining a light into all the efforts and research that animal ag puts into sustainability and making sure we are doing our part to really make progress in our operations, in how we take care of our animals, but also in how we are taking care of the environment and how this impacts the climate, right? Because we know that sometimes animal ag can get a little bit of a bad rap. And this interview with Dr. Frank Mitloehner really dives into a lot of things about his beginnings, how he got really interested in these topics, but also we talk a lot more about what is the impact of animal agriculture? What do we need to understand about this? How can we continue having conversations about this really difficult topic with other people in agriculture, but also consumers? And we thought it was the perfect time to really talk about these things because it's always important, but it is also June Dairy Month. And we dive into, again, just some really fascinating statistics about climate change, about the environment, about GHG emissions, and how all this comes into play. And since we are so excited for this interview, we're going to dive right on into it. We're going to pass over the highs and lows this week, but I promise those will be back next week. But again, there's so much good information. There is so much good conversation in this episode, and we really want to dive right in. So enjoy. We are so excited to officially welcome Dr. Frank Mitloehner to the Cowgirl Talk podcast. And I have to be honest, I'm fangirling a little bit over this moment because, fun fact, back in 2019, right when I went full time with Dairy Girl Fitness, I actually got to see Frank speak at World Dairy Expo. And it was just a really awesome experience. And I think he breaks things down so well. And so we are so excited to have this full circle moment and have him on Cowgirl Talk. So welcome to Cowgirl Talk, Frank. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
So are we. And so some of our audience may already know a little bit more about your work, but in case anyone doesn't, would you mind just giving a little bit of a quick introduction of yourself, of your work, so everyone can kind of understand who we're listening to as we go through this conversation?
Yeah, I'm a native from Germany. And when I was back in the old country, I did a master's in agriculture engineering. And then came to Texas Tech University when I was 27 and worked on my PhD in animal science. And then 22 years ago, I started my current job at the at the University of California in Davis, where I'm a professor and air quality specialist in the Department of Animal Science. And I'm also the director of the Clear Center here at UC Davis, which is a sustainability center that does research and communications around these topics.
Building off of that, Frank, whenever Emmy and I were planning out our questions, we're so curious. Whenever you came over to the U.S. to get your PhD in animal science from Texas Tech University, what did you originally plan to for your career to be? Was it always in sustainability or what you're doing now, or was there something else that you had in mind to begin with?
So when I worked on this first, the S word, as people called it,
I love that.
they really called it the S word. It was a curse word, okay? And I always wondered, why would people in animal agriculture call sustainability a curse word? Why do they think it's a liberal conspiracy when people talk about sustainability, when indeed, it is really nothing other than stewardship. And let's just break down stewardship for a second. So if you were a farmer, would you not be proud if somebody were to say, you are a great steward of the land that you're working on, the soil, the air, the water, and so on. Of course you would be. Would you not be proud if people were to say you are a great steward of your animals, their welfare, their health? Of course you would be. You would want to be the best steward of the products you produce. So food safety, food quality. You would want to be the best steward of the workers, of the people who work on your farm, on your ranch, because that is the lifeblood of what you have to work with, the workers. And finally, you would want to be the best steward of the financial resources. So environmental quality, animal welfare, food quality, workers, and financial viability are the 5 pillars for stewardship. And guess what? They're also the 5 pillars for sustainability. In cities, they call it sustainability. In the countryside, they call it stewardship. Let's get over it.
Yeah. I love that. I think that leads nicely then into your question about one of the topics that, Frank, you focus on most. So, Em, I'll let you dive into that question next.
Yeah, this is one of the parts that I think a lot of people in general, consumers, but also in animal ag, that we deal with questions about this a lot, but maybe not everyone has a great grasp on it or great understanding because it can mean so many different things. And so we know that you talk a lot about GHG emissions. I know that your Twitter handle is GHG Guru. And so I think you break it down so well. And so I would love to hear, what is the simplest way to define greenhouse gas and the contribution that animal ag has to those emissions?
Yeah, this will take me a little while because it's an important issue to understand, because otherwise this whole talk around livestock and climate makes zero sense. So first of all, what are greenhouse gases? Greenhouse gases are those gases that when they're hit by a solar beam from the sun, heat up and trap the heat. Much like a styrofoam cup versus a China cup versus a Starbucks $20 insulated cup. All are beverage containers into which you can put coffee in the morning. Mm-hmm. The type of beverage container determines how long your coffee stays warm, right? Like a Starbucks insulated cup keeps your coffee warmer longer than a China cup or a styrofoam cup. Now, imagine these different cups being analogies for 3 gases. The one is CO2, carbon dioxide. The second one is methane, and the third one is nitrous oxide. These 3 gases differ in the way they trap heat from the sun. When a solar beam hits them, they trap heat at different rates. And methane is almost 30 times more powerful in trapping heat from the sun than CO2 is. And nitrous oxide, 265 times more powerful. So they differ with respect to how much heat they can store. And why do we care about greenhouse gases? Because cumulatively, all of the greenhouse gases that humanity puts into the air traps heat from the sun. And the more of those gases we put in the air, the more heat from the sun we trap, and therefore our planet warms. That's the reason why we care about greenhouse gases, and that's how they warm our planet. Now, in animal agriculture, we have one chief greenhouse gas, and that's methane. Okay, methane is generated anywhere where you have oxygen-deprived conditions, so meaning low oxygen conditions. And that could be in the stomach, in the so-called rumen of a cow. It can also be in a manure storage. It can also be in a rice paddy or in a landfill. So anywhere where you have organic material under anaerobic conditions, you have microbes producing methane. And yes, this is our big Achilles heel in animal agriculture, this very gas. But it is also a huge opportunity for us. And let me explain that for a second. The other greenhouse gases, CO2 and nitrous oxide, are only produced once they are produced by burning, let's say, oil, coal, and gas. These gases go into the atmosphere, and every time we burn oil, coal, and gas, we add more and more CO2 to the atmosphere, warming our planet. Methane is different, because methane is not just produced by things such as cows, but it's also naturally destroyed by a process called oxidation. There are other molecules in the air that kill methane. And that killing of methane takes about 10 to 12 years, and then that methane molecule that was produced a decade ago is gone. So if you, let's say, have a constant herd of cattle, let's just say you started with 100 cows in 1980, and then in 2000 you still had 100 cows, and in 2020 you had 100 cows. So a constant cattle herd then that means this constant cattle herd produced a constant amount of methane. And an equal amount of this gas that was produced by those cows was also destroyed by these so-called radicals. That's the name of those things that destroy the methane. So if you have a near constant source of methane, then almost an equal amount of methane that's produced is also destroyed. That does not mean we can relax in animal agriculture about the topic, because throughout the world, methane is not stable, but it's increasing. And that's particularly happening in developing countries of the third world, where demand for animal source foods is increasing, and as a result, livestock herds are growing. It is not happening in most developed countries, where our livestock herds are plateauing, they are stable, or they're even decreasing. So we have to be very nuanced in the discussion around methane. And we have to understand that if we ignore it and we just produce however much we want, then we have a potent greenhouse gas generator. We don't want to do that. But if we manage it, if we find ways to reduce that gas, then we can actually reduce warming. And that's a huge opportunity for us in animal agriculture.
Wow.
So I love how you said that we have to focus on the nuances of this conversation, because I mean, Emily and I have grown up in the dairy industry, and it's what we obsess over every single day. And there is, I mean, 90% of what you just said was new information to me, right?
Same.
So I'm always learning about this topic. So a question that we were going back and forth on how to ask is, and this might be a two-part question depending on your first answer, but why do you think that animal agriculture is such a primary focus in climate change conversations, even beyond the walls of the agriculture industry? So, I mean, I feel like everybody talks about it and is always is focusing a lot on animal agriculture. So I'm curious, why do you think it's always such a hot topic within climate change?
So first of all, the vast majority of people in the United States consumes animal source foods, such as milk, meat, eggs. The vast majority, in fact, in 98%, so almost 100%, 98% of all refrigerators, we find meats, milk, and eggs today. In 2% of all refrigerators, we don't. So the vast majority of people consumes these things and likes to consume these things. There's a small minority, and we might think, well, we can easily neglect them, but we shouldn't, because that very small minority is very vocal. And they make themselves sound like a massive wave of people who is about to change what people in this country eat. So they might be very big in their heads, but they're not really big in numbers. What the problem is that they have a huge megaphone and microphone at any given time, because large parts of the media sympathizes with them. And when you consume the normal mass media, you can read it every day, how cows killed the planet with respect to impacts on climate, the same with pigs and other livestock species. If it's not the climate issue, then it's another issue. It's food safety scares around pathogens, or it's animal welfare issues, housing, husbandry issues. On one day, it's one topic. On the next day, it's the other topic. That really hasn't changed. If you look at the reporting in and around animal agriculture of the last few decades, then you will have seen that first the discussion was around animal welfare. There's always the black sheep in animal agriculture someplace who neglects or abuses livestock. Okay, that's just happening. We have to be honest about it. There are bad players out there. And just for the records, I am 100% of the opinion that those people who are black sheep should be self-policed. We should absolutely call the police upon them and shut them down. They have no place in animal agriculture. But unfortunately, these people exist, and these days, everybody has one of those. One of those little, whatever kind of iPhone or other phone that is perfectly suited to take little videos, and these videos pop up on social media and are shared widely. And some of them are gut-wrenching. I am very clear about that. I absolutely despise it, and these people need to get out. And we in agriculture need to do our part for making sure that they get out, that they do not stay in animal agriculture. But these videos are used by activists to depict the entire animal agriculture sector as being inhumane and abusive, which of course we know is untrue. Then whenever a pandemic or epidemic happens, then the same people go out and say, oh, if you eat chicken or if you eat eggs or if you eat and consume dairy and meat products, then you might get sick, or we might all get sick and succumb to a pandemic. Or we get fat, or we get unhealthy, we get metabolic disease, and so forth and so forth. We've heard this many, many times. So most of the people who are adamant about these anti-livestock assertions have been in this camp for a long time. They're just changing strategies. The one that caught most attention and stuck with people the most was the climate approach of saying, look, we have a climate emergency. Our planet is getting warmer and warmer. And what you personally can do is change what you eat. That's what the activists tell people. Mm-hmm. So if you forgo the use of dairy and meat and other livestock products, then you can do your share to reduce humanity's impact on climate. That's their angle. That angle worked the best across all of these other angles. But I think that we were very successful in putting some of that nuanced discussion in. That is not at all a discussion deflecting of livestock's responsibility. We have a responsibility, but it is much different from what is generally depicted out there.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like kind of what you said as well, it really, where the negative side can come from is that people feel that this can be the one really personal thing that they do, right? And that's something that they can take to heart. But I know in a lot of your research and a lot of the articles that I've even seen published from you, and I'm sure a lot about what you teach and talk about in the Clear Center, what is the true impact that animal agriculture, and again, that's a big question, I know, but what is the impact that animal ag maybe really does then have on climate change, on the emissions, and is it really as big as people think it is? Because I even have people reaching out to me and they're throwing out crazy numbers like 50% or more, or really large numbers are coming from animal ag. But luckily, to what we've seen from you, we know that that's probably not the case.
Yeah, so the same activists that I just alluded to in my previous remarks like to confuse the consumer by using global numbers. Okay. So first of all, a cowspiracy, for example, this activist deal that came out spoke about livestock having 50% of the world's carbon footprint. Completely ridiculous. I had told them a decade ago that they were wrong, how they were wrong. And while they acknowledged that to me personally, they never publicly did. Then the United Nations FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, in 2006 came out with a report saying livestock emits globally 18%, 1/8. I criticized that. Later, some of that report got retracted and so on, but the media didn't report upon those corrections. They liked the original report with the 18% number. The same FAO agency, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, later revised their numbers, first from 18 to 14.5. And last year, they revised it further to 11%. That's global emissions of all livestock, global. In the United States, it's the Environmental Protection Agency that does the emission inventory for all sectors. And the EPA says that all of livestock in the United States, and that's beef and dairy and sheep and pigs and everything, poultry, all of animal agriculture combined emits 4% of total greenhouse gases in the United States. Of that, the dairy industry and the beef industry are the major ones. They're each responsible for about approximately 2%. Okay, so approximately, a little less, but approximately. So it is not true when people say, oh, beef or dairy emits the lion's share or a major share. They emit a significant contribution. 2% is not nothing, but it's certainly not what they make it sound like. If the entire United States, with 330 million people, were to go meatless Monday, like some people think we should, not eating any animal source foods 1 day a week, then that would reduce the carbon footprint of the United States by 0.3%.
Wow.
Now, you can decide whether that's a lot or not, but that is what it is. Sometimes people ask me, what would happen if I were to go from an omnivore diet to a plant-based diet? How much would that save with respect to greenhouse gases? My colleagues have done the research and they found that switching from an omnivore diet to a vegan diet, to name the most extreme, would save 0.8 tons of greenhouse gases per year. 0.8 tons. Now, you might ask, is that a lot or not? I recently flew to Europe, and this flight for the one passenger, Frank Mitloehner, from the United States to Europe generated 1.6 tons.
Wow.
So going plant-based is 0.8 tons per year, and one flight per passenger to Europe is 1.6 tons. In other words, I would have to go vegan for 2 years to offset that one flight to Europe per passenger. I can guarantee you that's not going to happen, but that's what I would have to do if I would want to offset that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, because whenever you were talking about that, Frank, I thought in my head, okay, this meatless Monday idea, but you've still got to eat something. So how do those two compare? And I think you making that comparison to a flight, which we all take with no problem because we all enjoy the fact that we can go anywhere that we want. So that's a harder thing to give up, right? And a harder thing, I think, to personally blame for some people. It's like, well, I want to travel the world, so that can't be the problem. And so I think that comparison that you've made it's kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah.
I've done the research to find out where this came from, that people all of a sudden looked at personal carbon footprint calculators and to tell people what they should and shouldn't do in life. It started with British Petroleum, BP. They were the ones who started it. And they did it because they wanted to deflect of their responsibility to carbon emissions, which by far is the most important one. There are 30 companies in the world that produce the vast majority of greenhouse gases, and they know it. And they try to deflect of it, and by doing so, by trying to deflect it, they are looking for other culprits. And there's the cow. The cow is a culprit that can't really defend itself, and so it sticks.
Yeah. Oh, that is one of the craziest PR spins I've ever heard of.
Yeah, if you go to clear.ucdavis.edu, my webpage in the Clear Center, and you go to blogs, you will find articles on that topic where I break it apart and explain it in detail. So I want to be very clear. I'm not saying that we don't have a responsibility, that we should not do something to reduce emissions. We should. We should, because we do have a contribution. And all the research we do here at the University of California in Davis in the Animal Science Department, in labs like mine and some of my colleagues, is aimed at further reducing those contributions. But we shouldn't toss out the baby with the bathtub. Okay, we need to say, okay, there's a contribution, but let's be fair with what the contribution is and work on our contributions and minimize them. I have news for those people who think that we all need to stop eating animal source foods and that's the way that we should go forward. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we saw this very strong promotion of plant-based alternatives. Do you remember that? The Impossible Burger, the Beyond Meat burger, Oatly, milk replacement, and so on. Go take a look what their stock market values are these days.
Yeah.
Go take a look. And you'll be in disbelief. I sat together with the presidents of these companies over dinner. I talked to them, and they told me by 2035, we will have replaced animal source foods. You know what? I don't know where they're living, but certainly not in reality. And I'm really not making fun of them. I'm just telling them, look, you are not grounded in reality. Animal source foods are not going anywhere. They are as popular as they always have been, and they are continuing to be that way.
Yeah. And what's funny is you were mentioning earlier that sometimes the minority can just be a lot louder when they speak. But I mean, I remember whenever I went to the grocery store during the pandemic, during COVID, the only thing left on the shelves was the alternatives to real meat. So when it comes down to a crisis, people want the real thing, I think, still. So I love how you're having these genuine, and I would say, you're not coming at them from a place of making fun of them. It's a very respectful conversation. So it gives me a lot of confidence and ease knowing that there are people like you out there that are being given the opportunity to talk to these companies and just have an honest conversation about what is reality and what is not. But Emily, I think that one of the questions that you wanted to ask was more around, okay, what about people that don't necessarily have the opportunity to sit down with the CEO of Impossible Meats or Beyond Burger or something
there's
like
so
that?
many.
So
I can't
I'll
remember
let
the
you
names.
give that question.
Yeah, because just even from this conversation, I've learned so much. And again, you have the opportunity, due to all of your hard work, of course, to have these really impactful, really cool, I'm sure sometimes frustrating conversations. But like Becca said, for the rest of us who want to continue lifting up conversations like this so people can see more of the honest stats and research behind it, what are some of the resources that we can continue utilizing to have more of these impactful conversations with consumers about the impact of animal agriculture?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it will not surprise you that I recommend the Clear Center webpage. Clear.ucdavis.edu is a wealth of information. If you go to the blog section, you will find dozens of blogs on topics, many of which are in the daily discussion in the mass media. Whether it's some of the stuff that we just talked about here, plant-based alternatives, or whether it's how do cows affect climate, or what's soil carbon sequestration, or what are technologies that can be used to reduce emissions. Many topics are in there. For people who don't want to read pages after pages, they're also relatively short explainers. Many of those explainers now pop up as number one when you do a Google search. We are very popular among organic Google searchers who want to know something from within animal agriculture, and our explainers pop up first. What is really important is that people in animal agriculture understand that there's a real interest now in animal agriculture and societal issues around it. And 20-year-olds today, they ask questions. And the worst thing that can happen is that they are turned away by a farmer. So, for example, if a 20-year-old says to you, look, I just read on the internet that there's pus in milk. Is that true? Okay. The worst thing in the world that can happen is that the farmer says no comment or go away. I'm not talking to you. That's activist stuff. That's the worst thing that can happen. The right approach is to say, look, what you're referring to is the so-called somatic cell count. And that means if a cow has an infection of the udder, and by the way, humans can have that too, an infection of the breast, then there will be immune cells in the lactation system. And so we are checking every gallon of milk in the United States for that. And if it happens, then the milk from those cows will not go into the bulk tank. It will not end up in dairy products. So you can rest assured that cows are checked for infections, and if they have one, their milk will not go into the supply chain. And the sick cow will be treated like a human mother would be treated, because that's the right thing. That is how you address a person with a concern, rather than sending them away. Because if you do send them away, they just keep asking the question, and guess what? There will be some activists that will answer the question in very different, not fact-based ways.
Yep.
Completely agree.
And so, Frank, before we get into some of our more personal questions that we have for you, one thing I would like to give you the opportunity to answer is, you have done a lot of amazing work over your years. for our Cowgirl Talk listeners, what is one thing you would like to leave them with or make sure that they take home from this conversation that we've had around your career and the work you're doing for animal agriculture, sustainability, and animal welfare?
5 years ago, my father passed away. And my father was very proud of the work I do here. And I know many fathers are proud of their kids, and my father was proud of me. And before he passed away, he said to me, Frank, always remember this: do good things and talk about them.
Wow.
Oh,
Do
that's
good things.
amazing.
Do good things and talk about them. It doesn't get any simpler than that, but it's so true, because many people in animal agriculture, they wake up and they think about their animals. If there's any problem, they are with their animals. If there's any disaster or so, they can't keep their mind off. How do I make sure my animals are safe and healthy? How do I make sure that I produce a safe and wholesome food item? How do I make sure that the people who work for me are happy in their jobs and don't leave the farm or ranch? It is very important for farmers to be open and be more communicative around this stuff. They don't have to talk to the New York Times, but they can talk to their community. They can talk to their own family. I mean, I oftentimes hear that some family's child turns off toward animal source foods, oftentimes because they're not engaged enough. They don't even know themselves, even though they come from farming. I think it's very important that you all understand that it's not just a job for people like myself to talk about animal agriculture, but it's all of your job. It is your legacy that either remains or doesn't. And so my legacy is to continue improving sustainability in animal agriculture and talk about it. And that's why I established the Clear Center.
I'm fired up now.
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
Well,
wow.
I mean, you have been doing great things and you have been talking about it. And I think that, just based on the years of following you and what you've shared on social media, you've gotten to go to, I think, some really cool events or places and some really cool people that you've got to speak with and experience. So this might be a hard question if you can narrow it down, but what is the coolest experience that this career has provided you, whether that's a person, a place, an event, something like that?
That's very hard. And that's really hard.
Yeah.
There's like a top 3, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean,
we can
literally,
expand it.
Look, every 3 years, I have to write down all the stuff I do, or I did the last 3 years. Okay. And so I just recently did the math. I've given 1,000 invited talks. And so it's very hard to say which one my favorite was. But I meet so many really cool people. The last 3 days I spent with Temple Grandin.
Whoa.
That's pretty awesome.
And Temple Grandin's doctoral advisor is my academic grandfather. And so Temple Grandin is my academic aunt.
Oh my
and
gosh.
So it is really uplifting to know that there are people like Temple in animal agriculture who have given their whole career to improving sustainability and learning from her, learning from others like her, sharing information at platforms like the National Academy of Sciences, where I've been numerous times a committee member. I have done a lot of work internationally with the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO. Originally, I was one of their greatest critics because this Livestock Strong Shadow report they put out some long time ago really put a black eye to animal agriculture that was undeserved. But in the following years, I worked very closely with them, and I have to say the work that comes out of that shop is now solid. And I'm very proud to be part of that. But I think the most important thing that happens in my life is when I go to a producer meeting and there's an elderly person, and that's really the emphasis here, an elderly person, a man or woman in their 70s, coming to you, shaking your hand in this way that only a farmer can, and thanking you from the bottom of their heart for doing the job you do.
Wow.
And for the impact you have. That to me is really, really special, very special. And I tell you one little anecdote here, okay, because it always stuck to me. So one day I drove down I-99 with one of my graduate students, and my car kept dingling and dongling and making sounds, and so I turned all the alarms off. And then all of a sudden, when I was in the middle of this interstate trip, my car stopped working. And I was able to steer it off the interstate down the exit ramp. And my graduate student asked, well, what's going on? And I said, I don't know. And I looked and I ran out of gas.
Oh my gosh.
Never in my life had I run out of gas, but I did on that day. And now I was in the middle of nowhere. Okay, there was no city, no village, nothing anywhere near. And so I told her, please stay in the car and I'll go see what I can do. So I walked down the ramp, and all of a sudden this big Caterpillar front end loader came my way. Okay. And I said, let's see what I can do here. I flagged him down. He stopped. The cabin opened, and the guy inside pointed his finger at me and said, you are the gas guy. And I said, and he meant I'm the air quality guy, right? And I said, yeah, I'm the gas guy. And guess what? I just ran out of gas. And he just laughed and said, don't worry about it. I'll help you. And so he took his big fat front end loader and he drove, I don't know how far, but he came back about 40 minutes later with a canister of gas. And he handed it to me. And I said, I'm so thankful. I can't believe you did this for me. I'm so thankful. Who are you? And he said, oh, I'm a dairyman. I live over there and, 10 miles down the road and so on. And I said, what do I owe you? Thank you again so much. What do I owe you? And he pointed his finger at me again and said, you owe me nothing. You owe me absolutely nothing. What you have done for us as an industry in educating us on things that we can do to improve and giving us practical tips and so on, that is something that that we will always be indebted for in you. And so you owe me absolutely nothing. And I always felt that there was a really nice story that that was heartwarming for me.
Wow. And I feel like, it really captures the essence of the ag industry. And I know we're a little more specifically in the animal ag industry. And that's just so awesome that you get to share your work and we all get to benefit from it in a really positive way. And to kind of wrap up our conversation, which again, I'm so excited that we got to learn so much from you. We thought it'd be fun to kind of end it on a little bit of a fun personal question, but coming from Germany to the United States, and specifically you went to Texas first, what was your biggest culture shock, and even maybe still today?
My biggest culture shock, that was very clear. It's very easy for me to answer what my biggest culture shock was, because the Texans thought they needed to break the ice with this guy from Germany in a special way.
Oh no!
I had just come off the boat from Germany, so to say. Okay, and they said to me, "We have a steak here that you can't eat." And I said,
"So Texas."
And I said, "No, I don't believe that." They said, $50 that we have a steak here that you can't eat. And so I shook hands, and there was my bet going. And they shipped me to the big Texan in Amarillo, Texas. And there they had a 72-ounce steak waiting for me.
Oh my gosh.
And I did not know what an ounce was. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So that was the biggest culture shock. But
wow.
But I ate it in 44 minutes along with the bread roll and baked potato and all the other stuff. And I won my $50. But now I know what an ounce is, and I will never underestimate 72 of them again.
Wow. That is impressive that you finished
Everything's
it.
bigger in Texas. Did they tell you that before you went over?
Yeah, but I didn't know it's that big. But now the certificate hangs right above my PhD certificate. You can visit it in my office.
This is just as important. This is one of my proudest moments ever.
Yeah, it certainly was one of the silliest moments ever.
Wow, what a way to get welcome to Texas. I mean, that seems very on par, as I know Texas is a lot of fun. But wow, just thank you so much for having this conversation with us. And I know you mentioned your website a few times, but if people want to connect with you or continue following along with what you're doing, because I know you really put out so much good research and different things like that, where can people find you?
So I'm on Twitter. GHG Guru is my handle. And my center webpage is clear.ucdavis.edu.
Amazing. Well, Frank, thank you so much for having a conversation with us. And I know that we took a lot away from this, and I know everyone else listening is going to be able to take a lot away from this and use this as a resource to continue having these really impactful conversations. So thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate you. Thank you.